Welcome to your first day of Algebra 2. Today we're going to learn about order of operations. This is something that should be completely review that you've done in Algebra 1, but we want to go over it to make sure you still remember your steps and are ready to dive into some Algebra 2 stuff. So some vocab that we need to make sure that we know before we start are your variables. Variables are symbols used to represent unknown numbers. A lot of times variables are letters in algebra, which pretty well they always are in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. Most common ones, X, Y, and Z. Any letter of the alphabet could be used, but X, Y, and Z are the ones that are the most common. Algebraic expressions, they do not have an equal sign and they contain a variable. They'll be something that you have to simplify, most likely, but not actually solve, because solving would then be an equation because it would have an equal sign. A formula is a mathematical sentence that expresses the relationship between certain numbers, and we'll be simplifying some formulas here in a little bit. As you recall from Algebra 1, your order of operations are something that you have to go in order to solve. You cannot skip. You can't skip exponents because you want to go to parentheses to multiply and divide. They have to be done in order every single time. So your step 1 is parentheses. Step 2 is exponents. Step 3, multiply and divide, and you always do that from left to right. So if division comes first when you're going left to right, that's what you would do first, and then you would multiply. Has to go from left to right, remember that. Just like you read, just like you write, always left to right. And then once all your multiplication and division is done, you will go to adding and subtracting. And again, you do that from left to right. So if subtraction's first versus addition, that's what you would do. Something to help you remember your order of operations is please excuse my dear Aunt Sally, and each letter represents a step in our order of operations. So let's do some examples now of this. And let me get to the right screen so I can help you here. Okay, so our very first problem says evaluate each expression if A is -2, B is 3, and C is 4.2. So the very first thing you do is you're going to substitute stuff in. So when it's where it says C, so it says 5C, we substitute 4.2 in. Anytime you substitute something in, you put parentheses around it. Okay, so there's our first one. Then it says -2. Then we have a bracket. A bracket is just another form of a parenthesis. Then we have another parenthesis. Write it just like it is. Then you have a B. B is 3 minus A, which is -2. And again, this is where a reason why we put the the parentheses around it when we substitute in, because we have a minus and a negative sign together. And we'll take care of that here in just a second. So if you guys remember, we open parentheses here and there's a closed parentheses here. So we're going to have to do that again here. So it looks a little funky because you got all these parentheses running around, but we'll simplify it in just a second. Then it says plus C, and C is 4.2. Again, put it in parentheses, and then we go through our order of operations. So remember, first thing, substitute everything in with parentheses around them. Second step is to go through and solve. And so we're going to do step 1, which is our parentheses. Now, if you look back to our original problem, the brackets work as parentheses, so we have to work inside the brackets first. Once we get inside the brackets, we re-ask our question. Is there any parentheses inside the brackets? And there are. We have this step right here. So you have 3 minus -2. Remember, a minus and a negative sign together are really an addition, so that's really 3 plus 2, so we have a 5 there. So once you're solving this, I want you to bring everything else down. So we have 5 plus, now there's nothing, these parentheses right here aren't doing anything, because the plus sign and a 4.2, we can write that as 5 plus 4.2. They're just there as a precaution, just to make sure we're keeping everything separate. So now you go to you look at your order of operations again, and you say, is everything done in your parentheses? And if that is true, then you solve that part. And so this becomes 9.2. We've done everything inside parentheses. Parentheses means you have to solve the stuff inside it first. Second step is exponents. If you look at our problem, we don't have any exponents. So we're going to go on to the next step, and it says multiply and divide left to right. And so we're multiplying and dividing left to right. We're going to do this step 1. This is our first multiplication because a parentheses, a number right in front of a parentheses means we're multiplying it. So we have 5 times 4.2, which we get 21, minus, we have 2 times 9.2. And since I brought that minus down, that is not a negative 2. It's just minus 2 times 9.2. When you get 2 times 9.2, you get 18.4. And so we've done the multiplication. There wasn't any division in this problem. And step 4 is adding and subtracting. And so we're going to subtract 21 minus 18.4, which is an answer of 2.6. And that is our correct answer. I had to verify that for a second just to make sure we were right. Anytime you have an answer, I want you to box or circle it. Sometimes I mix it up. Sometimes I do all boxes. Sometimes I do circles. Up to you, whichever one you feel more comfortable with. Just please make sure that you identify it in some way that I can see it. Okay, so let's do the next example. Example number 2. Go ahead and get them all on the sheet. Example number 2 says b cubed plus ac over ab plus 2bc. We're using those same numbers as before. We're using the -2, the 3, and the 4.2. So b was 3, so again we're substituting it in, and when we substitute it in, make sure you put parentheses around it and then cube it. It's completely different to have a 3 cubed and then parentheses as it is parentheses 3 parentheses cubed. Now on this problem you get the same answer, but if it was negative you may, if it's negative and it's an even power, you would get a different answer. So just be very careful by that. So then it says plus AC. So A is -2 and C is 4.2. Remember, when you have these parentheses right by each other, it just means multiply. On the denominator, we have A times B, so we have -2 times B, which is 3, plus 2 times B, which is 3, times C, which is 4.2. And once you start this part, okay, once you get to this part here, you're going to solve the top and bottom like they're separate problems, and then at the very end you're going to divide. You have to get the answer to the top, then get the answer to the bottom, and then divide as your last step. So the very first thing you're going to do is take that 3 cubed there. And when you take the 3 cubed, oh, my pen stopped working. When you take the 3 cubed there, you're going to get 27. And so you're probably thinking, Mrs. Holmes, you completely skipped over the parentheses part. And I didn't. I didn't really. Because parentheses means you have to solve what's inside of parentheses. And if you look at this, we don't have anything inside parentheses to solve. So you go straight to your exponents. And so the very first thing you do is 3 cubed, where we get 27, plus, and then we're going to rewrite the problem, -2 times 4.2 all over -2 times 3 plus 2 times 3 times 4.2. So we finished our parentheses, we finished our exponents. The next thing we have to do is multiply and divide left to right. Remember that division, that fraction bar right here is the same thing as a division bar. Fraction bar, division bar, same thing. And so what we're going to do is multiply, because remember what I said, we have to get an answer to the top and an answer to the bottom before we can move on. So the top we do 27 plus, and we're going to multiply that -2 times 4.2 and get -8.4. I'm still putting this in parentheses because of that plus and that negative sign together. Remember, a plus and a negative sign together become a negative sign, or a minus sign. Negative, minus, kind of same thing there. So now when I go to the bottom, I can multiply and divide left to right. So there's no division, just multiplication. So I'm going to multiply this -2 times 3 plus I'm going to do all of the multiplication here. So 2 times 3 times 4.2, and I get 25.2. Now I've done all of my multiplication. Remember that division is going to save till last because I got to get the answer to the top, then the answer to the bottom. So I got to do that 27 plus negative 8.4. I get 18.6. And then on the bottom, I get negative 6 plus 25.2, and I get 19.2. At this point, when you can divide, you can take the 18.6 and divide it by the 19.2 and get an answer of 0.96875. And remember, circle box. This time I circled, last time I boxed it. Doesn't really matter as long as you are showing me where the answer is and that you accomplish that. Okay, we're going to attempt one more problem for this lesson. It's a word problem. Do not get freaked out because it's a word problem. Anytime I see a word problem, I want you to underline things that are important. And then I'm going to tell you some information that I kind of left out on this part, and that's okay. It says a player's attack percentage A is calculated using the formula A equals K minus E over T, where K represents the number of kills, E represents the number of attack errors, including blocks, and T represents the total attacks attempted. Find the attack average given the set of values. So my thing that's most important here is this formula. You also need to know what each letter represents because in the problem they're probably going to say, this is what K is, this is what E is, this is what T is, and so when they tell you later that kills were 5, you need to know what to plug that in for. And so I'm going to tell you what each one represents in this case. I won't always do that for you. They will get harder. Remember, this is just a review of Algebra 1, so it's kind of basic at the moment. So then plug all this in. A equals, what is our K? 22, minus our E, which is 11, over our T, which is 35. A very simple order of operations problem. There's no parentheses, there's no exponents. The division's the fraction bar, but you got to have the top to be one number, the bottom to be one number before you can solve. So you're just subtracting 22 minus 11 and getting 11 over 35. You can divide that out and you get 0.314, or if you want to put that in percentage, that's a 31.4% for the player's attack average.